Hello, 012 group. This is Colonel Gallagher, and this is a little brief lesson on fascism. And usually I'll riddle you with a lot of dates and some different things, but this time I'm going to go right to some interesting points about it. Fascism is kind of difficult sometimes to define, and you read enough about it, you get a little more confused. But the reality is, the simplification is what Mussolini said. It's where the state is everything and the individual is nothing. And probably the oddest place to start for me would be to look at fascism, is the word tyranny. And the place to start to me would be the American Revolution. The American Revolution, when the founding fathers pulled together and fought in order to create independence and then create their own nation, the American nation, with the Constitutional Convention, 1787. Um, their whole objective was to avoid tyranny, avoid really extremes. To one side, the excesses of democracy, which can also be just as bad, and tyranny. Now, when most people look at that, they think, well, democratic democracy is the most wonderful thing. But they knew better than a lot of us today the history of democracy. They didn't have a very good track record. And so, where do you put that power? And that's what government's really about. Where do you place that power? And so, in that wisdom of the founding fathers, the people of 1787, they put together a very creative design. But at the heart of it had to be this word ethics. No government, the government's only as good as its people, you can argue. And history, well, people say history repeats itself. History is more and better about, I'd rather say history is instructive and it's about patterns. And if you can imagine in the 1920s and into the 1930s, after World War I, when this wonderful world was being constructed, supposedly the world of peace and order, um, what rose was fascism. And it looked like fascism was the wave of the future, and democracy and capitalism had failed during this period of the Great Depression, this incredible global crisis. And with that in mind, fascism, such as when you studied in Germany, remember Germany was a republic, it was a democracy. And when you study, and I told you about Hitler, he was never elected, he was given power. And why this lesson is so important is it comes back to the word obey. The people had to obey to allow this to happen. It's an act of obedience. And the government itself in the American design is the people. And one of the things Hitler did is he destroyed all the opposition, which meant the parties. Germany had over 30 political parties. He reduced it to one. So fascism, my definition is real simple. It's not really mine, but it's the one I finally figured out. It makes most sense because a good mentor taught me this. And it's really about the word one. One nation, one leader, one party. There is no choice. It's the total opposite of democracy. And the objective of fascism is to destroy that. It's to build unity, they argue. But they use fear. And they've used fear, and it is still used today. There's the twins that we started with in my American history course. I pointed out the idea of fear and hope. Now, that's not mine, but it's a wonderful way to paraphrase it and put it together. Is the idea of that's what the whole design of the American nation is about. The United States is a pluralistic society. It's about the word diversity. And it's based on those ideas called the civil rights. These are human rights. And we saw this in my American history when we got into what's called the four freedoms. And the real instructive lesson then of history is you can't give your obedience without thinking. Even going back in history to a man named Cicero, and at the time the Roman history, okay, and Julius Caesar was attempting to make this grab for power. Cicero gave a very stern warning. He rejected Julius Caesar. And Cicero said basically the idea that the mind not equipped, okay, is a terrible thing, basically, but the mind that's properly equipped can resist this type of a process. Reason must take the place of fear. But fear is faster in our minds, it's instinctive and natural. And when you think of Hitler, and I go back to my mentor once again, no depression, no Hitler, and I'm firm on this. Fascism rose at specific times in the world. Communist societies, the Soviets, same thing. It's in a period of fear. And there's this hope they dangle, but it's only through this instructive nature of fear. Follow me and I will make you great. Follow me and I will give you the world, the status. But it also then teaches that there's these enemies and those undesirables and those that don't belong must go away. Now, for all the failings of the founding fathers, let me say there were. Okay, we had the issue of slavery and so on like that. The beauty of the American system, the greatness of the American system, has been the amending process. The process of the amendments is not somebody up in DC writes it and everybody follows it. It's a process of ratification that the states give the nod, that it is the majority that decides we shall do it. Even the Constitution of the United States, inked in Philadelphia, sent to Congress and approved by Congress, had to be approved by the states. So the notion and the idea of history, the instructive nature of it, is really that fascism is the total opposite. It's the total opposite of the American idea of 1776. It's the total opposite of June 6th, 1944. And I mentioned that because of D-Day. So fascism was this idea, the Nazis, best example in my book, of using fear, centralizing power completely to where one party, one leader, one will, but it was obedience. And that brings us to one of the most important things of a democratic system is called institutions. And institutions are the hallmark, the bloodline of the success of any democracy. An institution is a newspaper, an institution is a school, an institution is a church, for heaven's sake. Here we are on the weekend of Easter. And that's something I love about free will, by the way. Free will must be given, but it can only be given by the heart, you can argue, by the head. You have to think your way through it. Obedience should never be blind. Obedience should be with both eyes open, with a sense of truth and understanding. Okay, and that's why it's instructive. History is instructive, to think, to study, to look back, and use that as a basis. Fear has never made good answers. Fear has never been a good result. And in American history, we talked about Joseph McCarthy, McCarthyism, racial animosity. Racism is not something that is genetic. It's learned. That in itself is the ability to think. And so with that, I'm going to close with the idea of one of the greats, Lincoln. Odd enough to use it with World War II, coming of World War II and fascism, right? But Lincoln, in his second inaugural, which is one of the addresses most people don't read, it's kind of lengthy. But Lincoln, at the very end, said, "Malice toward none, charity for all." And then the next lines are more important. And the idea that with the right that we're given, which is not just power, but it's an ability that the people have, justice, the right to do right. And Lincoln was saying that the nation has to go on and has to remove this horrifying thing called slavery. It was an illusion to this. This was going to happen, okay? And the idea that we must now finish what has been started. And that's what it's about. Fascism is a horrifying, terrifying period. Hitler came to power during a period of democracy and republic. He came to power and promised. He came to power and he delivered what he said he was going to do. And people willfully gave their support. Those that didn't willfully, yeah, you know what happened. It became a police state. Those liberties goes back to another founding father, Ben Franklin, right? If you give up your liberty, your essential liberty, in order to get security, you deserve neither. And it's very true. Those guys knew what they're talking about. History is instructive. And so fascism is destructive. Fascism, if you get it, the one means no choice, no voice. And that's the total opposite of it. So on this wonderful weekend, whether it's Passover, Easter, what have you, the willful obedience to give it by the heart, but give it by the head. And the idea is to look back at history and remember, and think in a moment of crisis and fear, not to panic, but to think. And so I hope you're safe. I hope everything's going okay. We'll come back and look at fascism here on Tuesday, and hopefully we'll get a little bit deeper about this. That never again. We're moving towards the Holocaust now. Never again. Let us not forget. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.